Hello, everyone. This is Meher from Worth a Shot, and I'm so honored to have with me someone who has not only been the voice of scientific reason with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic, but who also spearheaded a movement of optimism with her infectious disease data analyses, predictions, and positive messaging. The terms vaccine optimism and T cells being the unsung heroes of immunity were made popular by her. And I have with me Dr. Monica Gandhi, Professor of Medicine, Infectious Diseases, and Global Medicine at UCSF San Francisco. She also serves as the director of the UCSF Center for AIDS Research. Thank you so much, Dr. Gandhi, for joining us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So, Dr. Gandhi, 60% of Americans have had at least one shot, and deaths have declined considerably in the United States. Do you think that this is the beginning of the end of the pandemic in the US?
Yes, I definitely think this is the beginning of the end of the pandemic in the US. 56% decrease in cases over the last 4 weeks, 28% decreases in hospitalizations, and 23% decrease in deaths. But actually, already the hospitalizations and deaths had gone down. But the cases really, once we reached 40% first dose rate, which is around April 14th in this country, the cases really came down. And it's great. And I actually have a data analyst who I work with who thinks we'll be at this 10,000 metric, which is kind of when Dr. Fauci said, we're done. Like, this is when you have very low rates in the community. And she thinks we'll be at this 10,000 metric probably by June 15th.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gandhi. So, Dr. Gandhi, you are known for your unwavering optimism through the darkest hours of this pandemic. So please share with us your main takeaways for us regarding pandemic preparedness and response.
For me, even though we went through a terrible surge, I actually started feeling really optimistic about the pandemic on November 9th, 2020, because that was the first day that we got the first press release for these incredibly highly effective vaccines. And it was the Pfizer in that particular case, and then Moderna was 1 week later. And the pandemic was just declared a pandemic on March 11th, 2020. So to have in the space of from March to November, a first effective and safe vaccine, then of course production had to happen, then long-term care facilities and healthcare workers got it, and it did take a while to roll it out to the general population, and then it took a while for cases to come down. But I feel like I knew just from how great that vaccine was that this was where we were going to be in May. And because it's not a tool of the pandemic response. It's the solution to a pathogen, is to get our immune system up to fight it. It essentially is putting a force field around us so that we're so protected from the pathogen. And that is so much better than masks and distancing and ventilation and testing and contact tracing and the 5 things we had to do before we got the vaccine.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. So there's a lot of confusion regarding the CDC masking guidelines, and not everyone agrees with them. So in your opinion, did they rush with regards to the mask mandates, and what would be your message to people surrounding that?
Yes, I mean, actually, I do think they rushed it. Though I wrote a piece in the Washington Post defending them. But the reason I was defending them and what that Washington Post piece was actually just going through the science, because everything that they said in their press conference on May 13th that announced the new CDC mask guidance, which was vaccinated don't have to wear a mask and unvaccinated do, everything they said was sound, meaning they went over vaccine effectiveness studies, that in the real world, these vaccines are even more effective than we saw them being in the clinical trials. They also went through many of the studies, there were even more, that show that vaccines stop you from transmitting the virus to others. So even from getting an asymptomatic infection in your nose so that you can't give it to others. And they went over true data sets and then messaged this message. I actually wouldn't have done that. And in fact, I was tweeting for quite a while leading up to that. And I just looked back and it was just 6 days before I said, just do it this way. and I, in fact, actually even emailed them and NIAID and a lot of people that weekend because I heard this rumor mass guidance was going on. And I said, do it this way. And my idea was truly that you should lift it for everyone at once. Once everyone who wanted their second dose got a chance to have their second dose, and you also cross-checked with the metric, like with the cases being low or hospitalizations being low in that region, either 3 over 100,000 either cases or hospitalizations a day, which would be 21 over 7 days. And I had actually put that really clearly down. And the reason is, what you do is you create a two-tiered system where the vaccinated can unmask, the unvaccinated can't, but it may just be that they haven't been able to get a chance to get their vaccine. And you also have left out kids who don't qualify for the vaccine yet. And that really confuses and can frighten and put undue burden on parents, because they're like, are they safe? Are they not safe? And so I would not have done it this way. And in fact, I think Israel and the UK, who are vaccinating faster than we, have decided to just lift it for everyone, and there's not going to be all this confusion. So I'm not exactly sure what led them to do it this way. The science is sound, but it was confusing.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. So there have been some reported cases of myocarditis in teens after the vaccine, and some people are talking about delaying the second dose. So can you please talk about that? And do you think that people should delay the second dose until further information is available?
Yes, I do actually. So what has happened is we already had a report in Israel that there were like 62 cases essentially of myocarditis occurring in young people. And it was important to say it was young, usually more in the teenage categories, just 16 and 17-year-olds, because that's the lowest that Pfizer was going down to until recently. And it was mostly males, interestingly, and I don't know why. And also it very clearly occurred within 4 days after the second dose, which makes it seem more associated with the vaccine than if it wasn't so temporally associated with the second dose. Now, teenagers are at less risk, clearly, of COVID-19 severe outcomes than adults. It's really adults, and especially older adults, who are more at risk. But the reason for teenagers to get vaccinated eventually is it does help adults, it does help the herd, but beyond that, you want them to grow up and be, protected. And we definitely do vaccines for children that, very readily. So it's not that I don't think teenagers should get it, but because this is such a new vaccine, this is what I think I really have very clear advice for parents of teens, actually. All the clinical trials were done after 3 weeks between doses with Pfizer, not because there was any science to that, but because they were trying to make it fast. They were making the clinical trials fast because they needed to get the results out and get this product out. And there's no biology that says that you should do it within 3 weeks. And in fact, there's now been data from Nature, Nature journal over the last couple of weeks that delaying the dose between Pfizer doses actually gives you a better response. So my advice to the parents of teens is to delay the duration between the first and second doses of the Pfizer vaccine, and 8 or 12 weeks. And that will give time for the immune response to come down after the first one, and then let you have that second burst of immunity from the second one. And hopefully they won't add up and cause this rare side effect.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. So do you think that we will need booster doses or annual COVID vaccines?
I do not think we'll need boosters. And in fact, some of this data that I'm going to tell you is really recent, but some of it's a little even older than that. But I put together in the San Francisco Chronicle today, and then there's another periodical. If you just go online and say Leaps Mag, Monica Gandhi, boosters, it just came out yesterday, and it's called 7 Reasons Why I Don't Think We'll Need Boosters. And the reason all this great immunology research is showing us is all of you have been doing, biology and immunology, but remember there are 2 arms of the immune system. There's B cells that make antibodies, and there's T cells that are really the main line of defense against viruses. And vaccines produce both, but what we want to know and make sure that you won't need boosters is, do they produce memory B cells and memory T cells? And what memory cells do is they go and hide out in your lymph nodes, in your bone marrow. They're kind of quiet. And then if they ever see the virus again, they come out and do what they're supposed to do. And memory B cells doing what they're supposed to do, they'll make new antibodies and fight that virus. And the memory T cells will attack the virus directly. And the reason that's important is antibodies don't stay in your bloodstream. If we all had antibodies in our bloodstream from every cold we've seen, we wouldn't be able to move because our heart would be so thick with antibodies. So the antibodies go away from your bloodstream, but the memory B cells stay around to be able to produce antibodies. And some really great papers have come out recently that after natural infection, this paper was just in Nature yesterday on May 24th, that if you biopsy people's bone marrows, they have formation of memory B cells after an even mild COVID. And then another paper a couple of months ago showed that after the vaccines, you biopsy people's lymph nodes and they have really good memory B cell formation. And then lots of papers have shown us that memory T cells form with either COVID infection or, importantly, after COVID vaccination. And not just T cells, but ones that go into those long-term banks. And so because of that, and then one final reason, influenza mutates really fast. It's just the kind of virus it is. You've learned that it's an RNA virus, and so is coronavirus, but we call coronavirus a DNA virus wannabe because it actually acts more like a DNA virus. An example is like herpes, DNA, herpes or chickenpox are DNA viruses, and they don't like to make mistakes. And coronaviruses actually don't make a lot of mistakes, and they don't mutate that fast. Influenza mutates very quickly. And so influenza has needed a yearly booster, but coronaviruses should not, especially once we get transmission now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gandhi, for this amazing information session and for your time today. We definitely need this shot of optimism to keep us going, and we're so grateful to get that from you. So a big thank you from the entire team of Worth a Shot.
Thank you so much.